Test.
Remember, I was fighting about a bunch of people who were concerned about the noise.
Yeah.
And the compromise was that we would approve the rezone if the smart centers, which i.e. Walmart,
Yeah.
and Walmart agreed to not object to the creation of a marital BIA and to be in that BIA. And at the time you said that if they challenge that, they want to be that condition, they would probably be in. But they didn't challenge it because it went to later. So. Okay. So, because they agreed. Okay. They're being fun. Because before we're trying to get the marital BIA going. And you know, this smart center thing was right at it. Like it's a team on the gravel applied. And okay, so we're about to get the thing going. They didn't object, and the time to object hasn't happened yet. They didn't object. They didn't say to me they were objecting or to case I got. But in appearance, they spoke to council and said.
Everyone, the clock up there is wrong, so I'm going by the time on the computer, which is, we're starting in 1 minute. Welcome, everyone. We have quorum, so we're going to get started. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendment items. I don't think it is 1 to 3 anymore, is it? As items 1, 2, item 2. Correct? Only item 2? On today's agenda. For the items listed above, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board if Council does not adopt amendment within 120 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 180 days for an official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available for any of you who aren't staff to sign up if you would like to speak or to write any comments on any of these.
Chair, it would also include item 3.
And it would also include item 3, which is the official plan amendment for cost sharing. Okay. Any declarations of interest? No? Confirmation of the minutes. August the 12th to 25th. Carried. Thank you. Okay. Item number 1 is zoning bylaw amendment. 2 4th Avenue, 364, 368, 370, and 372 Queen Elizabeth Driveway, and 1 5th Avenue. Is anyone in the audience here on this item? Just to let you know, we won't be able to deal with this today, as proper notification was not given, and it will be on the next meeting, which is the 22nd of August. Sorry, September. Thank you. Who didn't have a holiday this summer? Still hoping. Okay, so we won't be dealing with that. So the new number 1 will be the South Keys to Blossom Park, Bank Street Community Design Plan, Official Plan Amendment, Secondary Plan, and Zoning Bylaw Amendment. We're going to hold that for a staff presentation. Official Plan Amendment, cost sharing for park development outside the Greenbelt and in the rural area. Does everybody is good on that? I did want to ask Mr. Moser, just because I've had a few people on council ask me, what is that? Well, what is it really doing? So, Mr. Moser, can you just in a couple of sentences, as succinctly as possible?
Yes, Madam Chair. This is an implementation aspect of the new park delivery for suburban and rural parks. whereby if there's more than one owner involved in a development where there's a park, this ensures that the city, we will not sign off a subdivision until we know there's a cost-sharing arrangement with all the parties involved. So it's just to ensure that there's equity among the various developers doing a new park.
Everybody gets that? So, for example, I was using the example of Richmond, where we have a couple of very small developers, like very small. Richmond longtime residents have some land there, and then there's three larger players. And so one of them will be putting in parks of their own other than district. Everybody should contribute to it, so that, because all the residents moving into the entire area will benefit from it. So thank you very much for that. Is that Karen? Karen? Yes? Okay. Reimbursement program for development-related fees for charitable and nonprofit organizations, a 2015 update. Is it a simple question? Do you want to just ask it right now?
Could I just get a better understanding, even before the next council meeting, what the waived fees would be for the civic hospital rebuild? If the hospital is pegged to be about $2 billion, from what I understand, what the foregone fees would be for the city of Ottawa. I don't expect staff to have that now, but I just think it would be, I'm looking at the staff report, and all the examples provided are fairly small projects. I think we should also know what we would be giving up for some large ones that we know are coming.
This is before us as an update, and so just so that you realize, we're not reopening the conversation as to who should get a benefit, because we've done that twice, I think, since amalgamation. But we certainly can get you that information. And Mr. Mizzi has comment.
Madam Chair, Peggy Schenkus here and can confirm, but my understanding is through an omnibus bylaw a year or so ago, the ability to have this apply to hospitals was removed. That's my understanding.
Yeah. Put your mic on.
So just to clarify, when that project proceeds, the city will receive those development fees for that project?
Madam Chair, yes, that's
okay.
My understanding.
And, you know, we have had, and Councillor Shirelli has been there for because, of course, Queensway Carlton's in his area, and we've had this discussion time and time and time again. Thank you very much. Is that carried? Or received? It is carried. Thank you. And then we have Building Better Revitalized Neighborhoods, Program Framework and Councillor Sponsor Group. We'll hold that. And held by Councillor Shirelli. And then we have the status update, Planning Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending the 28th of August, 2015. Received? Thank you. Okay, so we'll go back to presentation for South Keys to Blossom Park, Bank Street Community Design Plan, Official Plan Amendment, Secondary Plan, and Zoning Bylaw Amendment. Mr. Smith, perhaps you'd like to introduce your team with you today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have with me Chris Brower, who completed the work on the South Keys Blossom Park Secondary Design Plan and Community Design Plan, rather, and Secondary Plan and Associated Zoning. Also have Dana Collings, who's Program Manager for the group. Basically, what we're dealing with here is a CDP. This was an initiative that was in the work program for last year, and a fair bit of work has been done on that. It's a continuation of the community design plan that was prepared earlier that ended at the railway tracks at Johnson Road, and there was a desire to see that CDP extended further south along Bank Street with a key focus on looking at the South Key Shopping Centre as an area for key intensification as a result of a desire by the South Key Shopping Centre to repurpose over time to more of a mixed-use type of a community within that area as a focal point for the community. So that's the high-level overview, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Brower, who will walk through a PowerPoint presentation to give you the highlights of the CDP, the secondary plan, and the zoning changes that are being recommended.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Mr. Smith. Chair Harder, members of committee, just before I begin, I'll introduce Adam Howell to the right of Dana Collings. Adam did the transportation-related work for the CDPs with Marshall Macklin Monahan. So just to orient the committee on the location, the CDP area is outlined in red on this plan. It encompasses about 150 hectares of land. I'll use the pointer on the mouse here. Bank Street runs through the center of the area, covers about 3.5 kilometers of bank in this location. Hunt Club Road runs east-west through the middle of the area in this location. On the south end, you may be familiar with the Blossom Park Plaza in this location. Up on the north and west is the very large South Keys Shopping Center Plaza in this area. The South Keys Transit Station is here, and this yellow star in Greenboro Transit Station, and this star, Johnston Road, in this location. The CDP consultation process began in the fall of 2013, involved a broad cross-section of the community, included community groups, local business owners, landowners, a technical advisory group. The public at large was engaged through a series of 3 public open house meetings held to receive response and input on the proposals of each iteration of the CDP and secondary plan. There was also a design charrette held to prepare a concept plan for the new mixed-use area, and regular meetings of the project public and business advisory groups. Key goals of the CDP include managing growth to ensure that intensification and full mixed use were concentrated in the new mixed use area around the South Keys Shopping Center. Generally, our approach was to permit more uses of land in each of the areas that are proposed to be rezoned, improving mobility by providing for safe, direct walking and cycling or active transportation modes throughout the CDP area, in particular to the transit stations, but also out to the community surrounding the CDP area, and increasing livability by requiring the provision of parks, plazas, and squares, high-quality public realm elements as part of the development of the area over time. The document itself is comprised of maps and illustrations and policies that will guide growth in the area over the long term. Again, one of the key features of the CDP and secondary plan is the creation of a new mixed-use area, which includes the South Keys Shopping Center and surrounding properties. That will be the focus of growth and density in the area over time. Also, we've prepared pedestrian and cycling plans that will ensure connectivity, as I mentioned, to the transit stations and throughout the CDP area. Key components of the CDP are proposed to be implemented through the official plan amendments and proposed rezoning, and I have some illustrations that I can show you what that is coming up. This is a land use plan that shows in the different colors the proposed land uses for the CDP area. At present, in the official plan, Bank Street is designated an arterial main street along its length, and that designation would permit a full range of employment, commercial, and residential on all properties that abut. What the CDP and secondary plan do is they refine those land use locations by putting different land use designations along Bank Street and in other areas that are more compatible with the surrounding community. For example, the dark orange area on the screen are areas that will continue to be designated arterial Main Street, including the south area here. The light yellow color is a new designation called low-density residential. It includes land on both sides of Bank Street in this area, along Albion Road in this area, and along the east part of Bank across the mixed-use area. The dark brown is a high-density residential to reflect the existing 21-story apartment buildings that are there. The Jewish Memorial Garden Cemetery is in a cemetery designation in this area. Land along Hunt Club Road is in a general mixed-use designation. The pink area delineates the extent of the new mixed-use area, includes a small portion of land on the north and east corner of Bank and Hunt Club, and all of the land west of Bank in this location. The employment land north of Johnston Road remains as in an employment designation. It's difficult to see on this screen, but some of the land is identified as an area of established character. You can see this light diagonal hatching here. It applies to this area and to the properties up here. And what that's meant to show is areas that are currently built, they're established, and we're not expecting change in those areas for the foreseeable future. So in those areas, only minor infill development and second unit additions would be permitted. You'll also notice perhaps there's two areas shown in a crosshatch, which is showing areas of future study. One of them is north of Seaverite Road in this area, and the other applies to the employment land in Johnston Road. And the idea in those two locations is to do further study in the future to determine if variations on the permitted land use, building height, or the location of buildings along the street would be permitted in those areas. And those studies would require changes to the CDP and secondary plan in the future if changes were recommended at that time. The CDP and secondary plan include walking and cycling plans. Again, this will ensure connectivity through the CDP area and to the community at large. This is an example of the pedestrian plan. It shows certain improvements to be implemented over time. These red asterisks show enhanced pedestrian crossing locations. There's several of them recommended. The light gray X here and down here show the location of future mid-block crossings to make it easier to get across a busy street. This plan also shows the location of future sidewalks. One of the things that came through in the public sessions for this project was the gaps in sidewalk along Bank Street South in this area. So this plan shows the addition of those in the future. There's also several new multi-use pathways proposed, in particular through the mixed-use area to give direct off-road access to the two transit stations, and in this location under the Hunt Club Bridge to the new pedestrian overpass along the Trillium Line in the future. I mentioned at the beginning that a design charrette was held for the mixed-use area. The purpose of that design charrette was to create a concept plan for the future development of this particular location in the CDP. The idea was for this process to generate elements that would inform the CDP in terms of desirable urban design components. So in particular, what came out of this exercise was the location of and the size and form and function of parks, plazas, and squares. They're shown in brown on this plan, very small urban areas. It included the protection of the Sawmill Creek corridor and the proximity of buildings along that valley. It showed street landscaping, a new main street through the center of the mixed-use area in this location, and also the location of various heights of buildings in the mixed-use area that are appropriate for the context of the community. So on permitted building heights, both the secondary plan and CDP include this diagram, and it shows the locations for proposed permitted building heights. The general approach was to arrange the tallest buildings with the best proximity to the transit stations. And this sort of salmon color, I'll call it, pinkish, dark pink, The permitted building height is up to 21 stories, and it's oriented around the South Keys Transit Station. 2 pockets in this area around the Greenboro Transit Station of up to 21 stories. The medium blue color would permit buildings of up to 15 stories on this north end of Bank and around the intersection of Bank and Hunt Club. The light blue areas in the center of the mixed-use area would permit up to 12 stories, and again on the north side of Hunt Club Road up to a maximum of 12 stories. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment includes a height schedule that matches exactly the height areas shown on this plan. Again, both the CDP and secondary plan include public realm plan, and this is to ensure that as development happens over time that we don't lose the important things that will make the mixed-use area a people place. This shows the location of the parks, plazas, and squares I was mentioning. On this plan, they're shown in green with a blue dot. The plan also shows the locations for 2 potential community facilities shown by these red dots. It shows street landscaping locations, important mixed-use or multi-use pathway locations, shows the locations of future service roads in purple here, so that buildings along the main street are serviced from the back, not the front, for example. The proposed official plan amendments create a new secondary plan for the entire CDP area. The secondary plan contains the policy basis for all of the CDP elements, in particular the land use and building height plans that I presented a few moments ago. It creates the new mixed-use area that I presented, which is the focus of highest densities in the community. So the amendment removes the existing minimum density requirement from the length of Bank Street, which is 120 people and jobs excuse me, per hectare, and refocuses that in the mixed-use area with a minimum density of 200 people and jobs per hectare. The secondary plan also contains policies for key urban design requirements, again, the provision of parks, plazas, and squares, and built form requirements, which would include, for example, the location of buildings along the street and tower separation for high-rise buildings. The amendments also propose changes to the arterial Main Street and major open space designations. This is a plan that shows it's primarily the new mixed-use area. The arterial Main Street designation north of Hunt Club Road in this location would be removed since it's being replaced with the new mixed-use area designation. And the land use designation along the Trillium Line, the railway track right-of-way presently is major open space. That's proposed to be changed to a general urban area designation to better reflect the use of that land and also provide for the opportunity for future air rights development over the stations. Most properties in the CDP area are proposed to be rezoned to conform with the CDP direction and secondary plan. The general approach to rezoning was to align the building heights and permit more uses of land on each of the properties proposed to be rezoned. This is a map that shows the proposed rezoning areas along Bank Street, south of Hunt Club Road, which is located here in the north of the plan. In this area, the dark orange properties are currently zoned arterial Main Street. The only change proposed for those dark orange areas are to increase the building height permission from 8 stories to 9 stories, and that's to align the permitted building height with an existing official plan permission for up to 9 stories in these locations. The ability to construct a building to that height in any of these locations is limited by existing building height transition requirements in the zoning bylaw, and that has the effect of stepping down building heights if you're constructing a building abutting any lower density residential zone. The 2 yellow areas, one along Albion Road and along the east side of Bank Street near St. Bernard, stay in lower density residential zones, but they are proposed to be rezoned to add additional residential uses at a maximum building height of 3.5 stories. This area along the south side of Hunt Club Road today is zoned a light industrial zone. It's proposed to change to a mixed-use zone, and that would allow the addition of commercial uses and residential to those properties at a maximum permitted building height of 6 stories. In the new mixed-use area, most of the properties are being rezoned from either an arterial Main Street zone or a general mixed-use zone. These are the areas in pink on this plan. They'd be rezoned from those two zones to the mixed-use center zone. That has the effect of adding additional uses of land, but in particular the ability to construct high-rise residential uses. Up in the northerly area, the north part of the park and ride is proposed to be rezoned from arterial Main Street to an open space zone. That's so that that area conforms with the official plan designation of major open space, but a zone exception would be included that would permit the existence and long-term use of that area for the park and ride. This section of Sawmill Creek that's located north of Daze would be rezoned from a general mixed-use zone to an environmental protection zone to reflect that natural corridor. It's the same zone that applies to Sawmill Creek to the south of the plan and south of Hunt Club Road. So in conclusion, staff are recommending that committee recommend approval of the community design plan, proposed official plan amendments, and zoning bylaw amendments. Thank you.
Okay. No, I don't think so. No,
Okay.
there aren't. Councillor Leeper, Councillor Hubley, Councillor Nussbaum. Okay, go ahead.
First off, congratulations. I know these CDPs are intensive efforts. It looks like you had some great community feedback. My question, reading this plan a couple of times, relates particularly to the South Keys shopping center area. You've got 2 public transit stations there, and I'm struck by the fact that the height would be limited in the most intense areas to 21 stories. Across the city, we've got TODs. In my community, we've got things like the Bayview Yards, the Gladstone Spine, where we're seeing really significantly higher heights. Why limit the height in these areas next to transit stations to 21 stories? We want to intensify. This is an area that's appropriate for intensification. It's right on the transit corridors. The impacts are going to be mitigated to the adjacent low-rise neighborhoods, which are some distance away. Why what I would characterize fairly low heights in this area that's ripe for intensification?
And maybe further on that, what does today currently allow in those places, so you can see the difference?
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor, the reason for the cap at 21 stories, it is a bit of a different number, is the area is under control of the Ottawa Airport Authority, so it's a zoning height regulation imposed by the airport that limits buildings to 21 stories. It's actually shown as a height above sea level. In our calculation, we can provide for a 21-story building in that area. And to answer the chair's question, the existing permitted heights are generally about 8 stories in this area, although a couple of properties will permit 12 and 21 stories today.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good information. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you give us a sense of what the CTP will cost all in to go through this exercise start to finish?
To the chair, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. The cost of the CDP to prepare it or the cost to implement it?
The whole thing, start to finish. And I'll tell you where I'm going with my question is, what we're finding with these CTPs is they're often challenged. We're ending up going to the ONB. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win, but they seem to be a very controversial document. And from what I've been looking at so far with these, is they're quite expensive. Like, I would expect your answer is going to be somewhere higher than $250,000 to do the whole thing.
Through Madam Chair, the cost for this one was done mostly by staff, so it was in-house. So it was staff cost. We did have to hire some consultants, some and they were in the just over $60,000 range for the technical services.
Sorry, Dana, what did you say? What range?
60,000, 60 to 65, I think it was.
To do it, and then implementation costs?
No, that was their consulting fees required for the transportation analysis component of the study. So the rest of the costs were staff costs.
Which costs the taxpayer, so any idea how much that is?
That would be a guess, and we can provide a breakdown for you, but I can't sit here today and give you a fair indication as to what the staff cost would be.
If you could get that to me, I'd appreciate it, because along the lines of what Councillor Leeper's is suggesting here, there was another area in there where you're talking about making a change from 8-story to 9-story. I'm not seeing the benefit to the city as a whole of doing this plan. It doesn't show me where you're going to get a whole lot more people in this area. You're talking about adding in some commercial development along Hunt Club. Well, we can do that without spending, let's just say it's $250,000 on a CTP. I'm just wondering why we're going this route instead of changing, for example, Hunt Club where it is. If someone wants to build a 9-story versus an 8-story building, do that as an application. What happens if they come in and they want to do 10 stories? Then we're back into this whole situation where the community believes that they've got, to use the chair's words, certainty because of the CDP.
It wasn't the chair's words, just, it was another chair's words.
Another chair's words.
Certainly I needed to say that.
My apologies. To use other people's words, certainly with the CDP, yet the application for 10 stories or 11 stories may be something that this committee and the community may want to see. So I'm trying to get a sense of why we want to go this way.
So in response, this was an item that was identified on the work plan. It was initiated by Councillor Deans, who asked that we look at doing a CDP for the section of Bank Street as a continuation of the CDP that was done for the northern section of Bank Street. The CDP does set overall direction in terms of how this area will evolve. The primary area of change is expected to occur at the South Quay Shopping Centre. The owners of the South Quay Shopping Center clearly had expressed a desire to transform the vocation of that site from what it is today, large format retail, into more of a mixed-use area. And with that, we felt there was an opportunity to take a closer look at some of the details along the other section. The important thing to note in this instance is we do have a secondary plan. The secondary plan does allow for some degree of flexibility in the interpretation of some of the directions that are articulated in the CDP. So if somebody were to come in, for example, asking for a 16-story building where a 15-story is identified, that wouldn't necessarily kick in a requirement for an amendment to the secondary plan. It's the secondary plan that would be the key driver in terms of any zoning change having to conform with it. So the CDP provides overall direction. Key implementing tools are the secondary plan and the zoning bylaw. The secondary plan does carry with it some degree of flexibility and interpretation.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nussbaum?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to zone in a little bit on the South Quay Shopping Centre. I think, Mr. Smith, you may have just mentioned the answer to the question that I was going to ask first, which is, I believe this mall is opened by the Canadian Real Estate Investment Trust, and my question was, to what extent were they involved in the charrette, and are they expressing an interest in investing a lot of money into the shopping center to achieve the types of changes that are envisioned in the plan, particularly the as-of-right zoning, so transforming these parking lots into buildings? I think it's a great idea. I'm just wondering to what extent the property owner is invested and interested in pursuing that.
Through the chair, actually, Smart Centers is the major landowner in that area. They were around the table through the entire process. They participated in the design charrette, and they're in agreement with all of the design components that we're proposing in the CDP, the various building heights that are proposed, and they're supportive of our planning.
And did they give any indication that they were going to invest as per the zoning? I mean, are they prepared to make what I imagine is fairly significant investment in order to achieve these types of changes?
They don't have a current application at the city, but they are talking about incremental change over time in this area, and they're in agreement with providing the various urban design components I mentioned as they develop. So this would, obviously, it's a big area. It would occur in a phased development approach. So at each phase, they would be providing sidewalks, multi-use pathways, the parks and public squares. I was involved in this project about 3/4 of the way through the project, and in my time this year on it, they were submitting ideas to me for designs on the town square, for example. Okay. So they seem to be invested in the idea and are supportive.
A quick summer anecdote, Madam Chair. I had the chance to look at a refigured suburban shopping mall in Toronto over the summer called the Shops at Don Mills in Lawrence, which is a very interesting example of taking a traditional shopping mall like this or box store model and turning it into more of what you're showing on the CDP. I believe it was Cadillac Fairview, but a very interesting and I think successful model of doing the type of thing that you're imagining here. So for what it's worth, you may want to take a look at that. My last question was the future Main Street. Would that operate then as a private road, or is the idea that the ownership of that future Main Street would be deeded to the city? How would that work?
Again, through the chair, the idea is that would become a public road over the fullness of time. It would certainly begin, because of the phased development approach I was mentioning, as a private road built to the city standard as we've outlined in the CDP. But once the entire length from north to south, from the extension of Johnston Road down to Daze is complete, we would look at a dedication of that at the time of subdivision approval.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. And did you say that was Shops at Don Mills? Yeah. That's good. Thank you. Perhaps Mr. Mizzi could find that information, share it all with us. There probably is some information that, certainly with your contacts there, you could get some. Thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. It's kind of a follow-up on some of the questions I've heard, and I'm taking an experience in my area where we have Searville Station. It's prime. It's a gem in the city that hasn't really had much done. And with TOD, I've already seen expressed interest by a lot of groups thinking about, residential, lots of intensification, stuff that we preach as a city. But I look at this up here, and thank you for answering the question on the 21-story, because I had that exact same question. I see 8 blocks of 12 and a couple blocks of 15. Why would we limit ourselves to that many stories? How did that come about? Why aren't they all 21 across the board?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, the idea was we were trying to build the pyramid of height with the tallest structures closest to transit and furthest away from existing development. So, for example, the buildings on the east side of Bank Street are generally a lower profile building of 3 to 3.5 stories, so we felt it was appropriate to cap the height at 12 stories in those locations. And similarly, the south of Hunt Club Road, that community is existing as mostly lower profile buildings, and so we kept the height at 12 stories in those areas. 15 was a height that we felt was appropriate for the intersection of Bank and Hunt Club to provide the opportunity for a bit of a node or higher profile buildings in that area for a sense of entry into the area, and it was the same approach in the north end to allow 15 to 21 stories to have that sort of gateway feature coming in from the north.
Okay, so I think I understand the gateway component, but I'm not really solid on the rationale behind, some of the 12 stories. Is it for community feel more than anything? Like, what was the restriction? Frankly, in my mind, I don't know why we just didn't go 21 across the board and give that opportunity, because we don't have a $1 billion rail system in everyone's backyard, and this is where we want to have that development.
Thank you. Through the chair, we actually took a very similar approach here in the mixed-use area as we did on the 6 TOD areas that were before committee for approval. Even in those areas, there's a gradient of permitted heights in the TOD areas that would go from 6 to 20 to 30 stories, and we located those heights in those areas and areas looking at the context of the community as we did here, and certainly put the highest potential density with best proximity to the stations themselves. The idea is that, and again, these are just permitted building heights. It doesn't mean that they're required to build, so we're allowing for the potential for those higher buildings in those locations. We expect that we'll have a variation of height as approvals come through in the future. We may get lower buildings. One thing that I wanted to mention is we have that minimum density of 200 people and jobs per hectare in this area. That's not as dense as in the TOD areas, but for example, the existing density in this area is about 50 to 55, so the minimum density moving forward would be 4 times what we see here today, and of course we're hoping for more in particular because we're so close to transit.
And I'm glad you brought the point of density up, because funny enough, I just had the matrix on my screen in regards to TOD around Searville. And currently, for 2012, it says 5,000, approximately 5,000 is the estimated population, so 55 per hectare. The long-term anticipation with TOD, it's 40,000. And that's 410 per hectare. So I just want to know how, when you look at a TOD like Searville, which is right at a station, very similar to this, why they wouldn't align closer?
Again, through the chair, the numbers that the councillor are quoting reflect for the TOD areas what we thought the maximum could reasonably be in each of those areas. So what we were targeting in the design of those areas was the potential to go as high as 400 people and jobs per hectare. The minimum required in the zoning bylaw and through the secondary plans in those areas, as it is here, is less than that. My memory is faded on the exact density for Searville. I think the minimum would produce in the high 200s for that area. We produced a concept plan for each of the TOD areas that would show what would happen if every property redeveloped, and every property redeveloped to about the fullest potential on each parcel, and that generated the 400 number that the councillor was referring to. It's unlikely that we would get all properties redeveloping and all of them redeveloping to the fullest potential, but we wanted to demonstrate to the public what the best case would be in terms of density over the long term.
Right, and I completely agree with that, but at the same time, I think we're handcuffing ourselves by not going to the 21 stories. And, we have to take advantage of every opportunity we have at those transit nodes. It's just a personal feeling I have on this one. I will be obviously supporting this, but I do think that we are not achieving our density targets as we have done in other areas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So to staff, before this comes to council, which I guess is the 23rd of September, I think I've got Councillor Rupert wants to ask a question, again, Councillor Brockington before him, but we've had 3 of the speakers at least speak about height. And it's been a while since we approved the transit-oriented development east of Herdman East. And I know that we're going to be looking at the Bayview West, I guess, would be the best way to say it as we get into stage 2. This, because we already know the Trillium line is going here, I think that you're hearing that they want some flexibility. So on the CDP having it in place, for example, down where Farm Boy is, you're still not, I don't know that you could walk to where a station might be with the airport vicinity and all of that, where the Trillium line would go. But what was the height that you're suggesting would be a cap at where Farm Boy and Blossom Park is?
Madam Chair, the permitted height in the southern end would be 9 stories. So it's shown at the bottom of that plan. That reflects the official plan permission for a medium profile building permission on arterial main streets. It's quite a distance from the Trillium line in terms of access. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a few kilometers.
It's closer than Barhaven. Okay. A lot closer. I just think that that's what I'm hearing collectively from people around the table. And then the other thing on the density shift, is that only at the South Keys that it's going up to the 200 where it is, eh? And so what is the rest of it? Because I notice you're keeping some sections of Main Street, arterial Main Street, so that's quite a long piece of area being designed. So what right now, what would the density be in the strip, and as opposed to what that change would be in the strip outside of the South Keys Plaza?
Madam Chair, our recommendation is to remove the minimum density from the south end of Bank Street or south of Hunt Club Road, and we're refocusing that in the mixed-use area. The 9-story permission in the arterial Main Street zones, which applies to most of the development land you see on the plan, would provide for a fairly high density. We did not do a calculation of the maximum potential in that area, but 9 stories gives you a mid-high or a mid-profile building. I know that you can certainly achieve very high densities in the TOD range with a building of 6 stories and above, so I think we could see significant density if the market is there and applications come through in the future for those areas.
So, and just one question before I go to Councillor Brompton. What does the height allow right now in that southern part that you're talking about? You're recommending 9 stories. What does it allow now?
The existing permission is for 8 stories, and so we're recommending that zoning amendment so that there isn't a misalignment between the official plan policy for 9 stories and what zoning is telling us. So the AM zone will permit a 9-story building.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockington, and then Councillor Leeper again.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you for your presentation. I found it informative. And I do recognize there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into where we are today, and I appreciate that as well. So just on community design plans, I mean, they provide definition and vision for a particular area and engages the community at the grassroots level. So I certainly support community design plans. I know that it's perhaps not, we've been having this debate lately, firm set in stone, but it does provide some assurances that the public can be engaged and they can provide input and direction on how they want their community reshaped going forward, and I see great value in that. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I certainly agree. I mean, you've got an opportunity here where you don't have neighboring residences to reshape a community and build high. And I just, as a frequent user of the South Keys Mall, I mean, River Ward is just on the west side of the O train line, and Councillor Deans and I, of course, work on many projects together, but I just see this open, vast area that is ripe for potential. And that Bank Street corridor, literally the land that just hugs Bank, build. I mean, there is a tower at Bank and Cahill. There is a very tall tower there. And I don't think we would be out of line by building similar height towers on the west side of Bank Street. So is the long-term goal to eliminate the South Keys Mall as we know it? No more grocery store, no more Walmart, no more service shops that people need? Is that the long-term vision, that this mall will be completely replaced by residential or other, or is there a way to amalgamate what we have now, maybe rebuild, but also incorporate the residential? Because my fear is there are services that locals need that, will impact their ability to get what they want. So just a staff comment, please.
Thank you, Councillor. No, certainly the vision is to have a full mixed-use environment in that area. The zoning would provide for that full range of employment and shopping and residential. That ability exists today. The change adds additional commercial uses and the ability to construct high-rise residential. And the area we would see being redeveloped over time, but replaced with a similar range of shopping. It's got a foothold today as a central area for shopping for the community. We see a valuable addition in that area of having more people living there as opposed to only working there. Today it's primarily an employment area. And so we see it just taking a different form with more of a main street, that same range of shopping, perhaps much smaller format shopping, along with the residential to support it.
Thank you. So people comment about the look and feel of the South Keys Mall and how it's, could be better designed going forward, but I just want to underscore that there are people who rely on grocery stores, that we see examples where the grocery store was closed at Westgate, what impact that had on people in Carlington who don't own vehicles. And there is a large population in that South Keys area who rely on that, who have no other grocery store to go to. So moving forward, I just want all parties to be aware of the importance of certain services. As we all know, this includes the community as well. And my last question is regarding how, when CDPs are created and we start to move forward, how existing problems are addressed. And the two ones I want to flag are the at-capacity park and ride at Greenboro. So if we add thousands of people to this area who will, I hope, take public transit, Hunt Club Road is at capacity, so not all these people will be taking public transit. They'll be driving to their employment areas, but Hunt Club's at capacity. The park and ride is at capacity. Obviously, people won't drive to the park and ride if they live in the area, but how do we address current problems when we want to enlarge and build within the immediate community? How do you deal with those?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, we're certainly, in our planning for this area, protecting for the existence of the park and ride. But the idea, and again, this is similar to our approach for other sort of transit-oriented areas, is that over time, more people will choose to travel through this area and within it by active modes of transportation. So more facilities for walking, better facilities for cycling. So it's an evolutionary thing. It doesn't happen overnight, but over time, as things densify and it becomes less convenient to travel in that area by automobile, people will choose to walk or cycle because it's faster and more attractive to travel by that way. So the area will densify. As I mentioned, there'll be at least 4 times the density in the mixed-use area. People in that area over time will choose to travel by other modes, taking public transit and walking and cycling to those facilities.
Okay, I'm back for anyone who hasn't spoken yet. Councillor Leeper and then Councillor Hubley. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's interesting that the proposal with this CDP is to actually rezone, not just implement a secondary plan, but to go ahead and rezone the subject properties so that they conform to. That's not always done with the CDPs. I guess I have 2 questions. One, is there a shift in thinking among staff with respect to the desirability of actually rezoning to conform to the new secondary plans? And secondly, have we given any thought to the foregone Section 37? Sorry, am I right? Section 37. The foregone Section 37 benefits that might have accrued had we left the subject properties with existing zoning?
Through the chair, so there is the ability with the CDP, it can serve as a basis for setting up a policy framework through a secondary plan, or can serve as a basis for actually instituting changes in the zoning. In this instance, the most significant change is really expected to occur on the South Quay Shopping Centre. South Quay Shopping Centre, because the owners were sitting at the table, participated in the process, there's a lot that's happening in terms of the transformation of that site into a true mixed-use community. So, as Mr. Brower indicated, there's parkettes, there's squares, there's plazas, there's an urban street condition that's being introduced. So a lot of the things that normally you would be trying to secure Section 37 dollars for, in fact, is being spelled out through the CDP, is spelled out in the secondary plan in terms of things that will occur over time. So in terms of the significant increased intensity of development that will be allowed there, it's all balanced off already, and that's the reason for the zoning. So it's not necessarily there's a shift. There are certain instances where we in fact do CDPs, where we do secondary planning, but we don't implement the zoning because there is an opportunity to secure benefits that you cannot secure the way they're being secured in this instance within the framework of the policy direction that has been established.
Can you help me understand that mechanic? I know in Carling Preston we did an area-specific development charge in order to ensure that the funds would be there to make the public realm improvements that are spelled out in the community design plan. What is our mechanics in this CDP to ensure that those public realm benefits are there? Because obviously the success of particularly the South Quay Shopping Centre as a desirable residential neighbourhood is going to depend on those benefits coming to fruition. So just taking through that mechanics, how will we ensure that those improvements are made by the developer?
So the mechanics in this instance is the use of holding zones, and the holding zone will require that as the phase development comes on board through the site plan approval process, that the things that are identified in the CDP as the public realm attributes that are going to be associated with the transformation of the South Quays into a new mixed-use centre, in fact, will be reflected on those site plans and will in fact be implemented by the developers. The difference between this and Preston Carling, you're dealing with individual properties that are basically standing on their own. Here you're dealing with a transformation of an entire area that in fact is under the control of a single owner right now. So in Preston Carling, we were looking to try to secure additional dollars that could actually go into existing public realm spaces. Here we're creating public realm, and the public realm is being created through the development review and approval process.
And in the instance of potential ownership changes, that holding zone still applies, and future owners would be required to adhere to that before staff would lift that holding zone.
That's correct, exactly. So the policies are in place, the obligations are set out through the secondary plan and through the holding provisions. So even if the lands were to be divided off and sold off, those obligations would continue to apply to the future owners.
Does the holding zone as a delegated authority in terms of lifting that?
That's correct. Lifting of holding zones is delegated to staff if the provisions that are set out for the lifting are satisfied. So staff would need to be satisfied that in fact the conditions precedent to the lifting of the H have in fact been met.
With the concurrence of the local ward councillor?
The councillor would be involved, yes.
Okay, that's very comforting. Thank you.
Thank you. And now over to Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow up on a comment that you made to the questions just prior to Councillor Leeper. You suggested making the area less car-friendly so that people will walk and ride their bikes 12 months of the year to go to these new shops and everything. Was any work done on figuring out where the catchment area for these shops are? Like how much people are coming in from Greeley, for example, Winchester, areas like that to shop at these stores, that cycling and walking really isn't an option for them? Have we looked at that before we make these transformational changes to push the cars out?
Through the chair, part of the CDP preparation, we didn't look at the market capture area, as the councillor is alluding to, where we were canvassing people who may come from other distant places of the city. or outside of the city to shop here. There will always be that component of the people who want to access this area. There would always be a requirement for some parking that would provide for those people who want to shop in the area. But again, over time, it would take a very long-term time for this density to occur, where it will become more convenient to access the public transit by walking or cycling or shopping in that area. Certainly, we looked at the catchment area that's typical for walking and cycling to make sure that we have appropriate connections. The cycling is approximately 1.5 kilometers or 2 kilometers for a convenient cycle to get into this area, and walking is 600 to 800 meters. And we made sure we had our community connections to this area in place for those two distances.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, it might be hard for the businesses to make a business case if they're only going to be counting on people in that area with the kind of density that you're achieving.
And people with disabilities are soon to be left out of these plans as well.
You know, is a given then that the stores would have to be sized down, because people, the vast majority of people that are going to South Keys are certainly not walking. Councillor Brockington was saying that his people are right across, just on the other side of the Airport Parkway, and they're likely driving. Some days it's scary enough to drive, let alone walk. Anyway, thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, well, I just want to thank you all. This is a big project, and it completes the Bank Street story, if you will, that started how many years ago? I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, or even more than that, eh? But it does, and so we've got the pieces of the puzzle along Bank Street. And I hope that there's enough flexibility built into this. Obviously, it's not going to happen in the immediate future, but as opportunity comes in, that it'll be good to have this as a guiding tool, for sure. Is that carried? Thank you. Carried? You'll dissent? Okay. Councillor Hubley is dissenting. Everybody else is carried? Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay. So we have Councillor Shirelli held Building Better Revitalized Neighborhoods, Program Framework, and Councillor Sponsor Group. Questions?
Okay, thank you. All right, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to...
Oh, Mr. Smith, you're staying there for that, eh?
Yeah.
And also, Mr. Smith may want to introduce Chris in this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So,
Second, Councillor
Mr.
Shelley.
Brower, who was involved with the South Keys CDP, is going to be the staff lead on moving forward on the Building Better Revitalized.
Can't hear a thing you're saying.
Sorry. So Mr. Brower in our department is going to be taking the lead on moving forward the Better Building Better Revitalized Neighborhoods initiative. He's got a lot of experience with the city and sort of taking on these types of projects, I think, as was evidenced with him stepping into the South Keys project. And Mr. Collings, who is also at the table, will also be involved. So basically, it's the three of us that are the key staff resources within PGM, with Mr. Brower taking the lead on that.
That's just a little bit of background. There is a report with this that lays out the fact that it'll be stage 1 comes back before Christmas, stage 2 is January when the money becomes available, we hit the street running, and the end result is delivered December 2016. So it's a 1-year project. Councillor Shirelli.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, my question relates to the composition of the sponsor group. And I was wondering if the Deputy Clerk could enlighten us on the constraints that we face in putting together a sponsor group, sort of the desire to include more members, perhaps maybe another member from CPS committee or more people from council, versus the shackles that I think are placed on us by certain offices of the province. You don't have to use those words.
Was that a kick in the teeth to Mr. Moran or something? So, Ms. Donnelly, oh, thank you for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, typically these sponsors groups, which were established as part of the 2009 midterm governance review, are designed to allow council, members of council and staff to work together informally on policy matters that are then brought forward for public consideration and public consultation during the standing committee process. We are always conscious of not having anywhere near a quorum of a committee, and we have heretofore been comfortable with 4 members for policy sponsors group. Chair Harder was quite firm that she believed that was not enough in this case. And to that end, we had, in addition to the chair and vice chair of planning, who were automatically members as part of council's motion, we had 7 members of council express an interest. We advised Chair Harder wanted, I can say, I think she won't mind a broader based, because she felt there was a lot of work to do. 6 members is as far as we feel comfortable with remaining informal as a staff working group, on the proviso that there's not only not a close to a quorum, but nowhere near a quorum. 6 members is already a quarter of council. Right now, the proposed membership has 3 members of planning, 3 members of CPS, and there is a crossover there with Councillor Caudry, and 2 members that are not a member of either committee. We were comfortable with that. We are very mindful of the broad interpretation of an informal closed meeting that have had consistent rulings by the Ontario Ombudsman. And when the chair and I discussed this, we really feel 6 is, to be honest, staff are not extremely comfortable with 6, but under the current membership, we were okay with the recommendation being brought forward. I hope that answers the councillor's questions.
Anything else, Councillor Schwab?
Well, it does. It also, I think, should raise concern with people, because we do have a body that is elected to make these rules, and that body is the Ontario Legislature. And it really bothers me when people who are not elected decide by interpretation to make a whole new set of rules, and everyone else seems to follow them because we're all afraid to challenge it in case there's retribution. And I'm hoping there are a lot of rules that have been interpreted or put in place across this province on the strength of somebody's will and without any electoral mandate whatsoever. And I'm hoping for the day when somebody will challenge some of these things in court so we find out what the real law is.
This is your day, Councillor Chiarelli. Take that on. Seize the moment. Yeah, no legal fees. Councillor Blaise says you could do it yourself. And obviously you have the interest. So, is that it for questions? Anyway, this is...
I won't dissent on the members chosen. Okay. Don't worry.
And actually, Councillor Tierney has a technical...
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then you wanted to also add to the... If you look at the people, as Ms. Donnelly said, it always was, this is a planning and growth management initiative, and it always was going to include the chair and the vice chair. So it was really through Councillor Wilkinson's motion to add to that sponsorship group. I know that many of you that declared an interest, and ones that didn't, will be interested in this as we go forward. It's going to be it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be very interesting, and I'm sure we're going to get lots of lessons learned that we're going to be able to, no matter where you live, no matter where you represent, at-risk communities will benefit across the city. Councillor Tierney?
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it is a technical amendment. So therefore, it be resolved that revisions are made to sentence 2 of the background section to be amended to read on June 9th, 2015, Planning Committee approved. And also, in the discussion section under the paragraph that lists the councillors recommended for the sponsor groups, the Councillor Tim Tierney information be amended to include Chair of Ontario Caucus of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
So that's why actually we did include the responsibilities of the people that are on this, and it gives you a really, really good, so we have Councillor Kadri, who is the Chair of Crime Prevention Ottawa, and also Ottawa Public Health, Councillor Tierney, who is the Chair of the Ottawa Public Library Board, but also the Chair of the Ontario Caucus for FCM, Deputy Mayor Mark Taylor, who is our representative to AMO, and this is a process working with that new community hub program that the province is just ushering in, and for a lot of other legislative possibilities that may come up, that's a good connection to have. And Councillor Deans, of course, is the Chair of Community Protective Services, and I'm missing one person. Oh, and Councillor Fleury is the Chair of Ottawa Community Housing, our largest housing provider, and then myself. So thank you, everybody. I hope that you'll stay tuned, because it's going to be interesting for sure. Is it, do we have to, is a technical amendment carried? And is the report carried? Thank you very much, everybody. Okay. Any notices of motion? Huh? How about inquiries? No? Well, then, other business? Nope. Okay, we're adjourned, and our next meeting is Tuesday, September 22nd. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mizzi.